I can still see that car in my mind. Gray, spotless, familiar. The same one I'd watched pull into our driveway every evening for nearly 10 years. Only this time it wasn't in our driveway. It was parked neatly in front of a little yellow house on the other side of town. I remember stopping my own car a few feet down the street, engine still running, hands frozen on the steering wheel. There it was, his company's logo on the side, his license plate. There was no mistake. It was his car. And it was Saturday morning. I'm glad you're here, because what I'm about to tell you isn't easy for me. It's one of those stories you think only happens to other people, until it becomes your life. And if my story helps even one woman trust her instincts a little sooner, then it's worth telling. Let me start at the beginning, or at least, what I thought was the beginning of a steady, ordinary life. We were the kind of couple people called solid. Not fancy, not showy, just solid. We both worked full-time, raised 2 kids, paid the bills on time. We weren't the kind to post about our love or go on big vacations. We measured love in small things. Packed lunches, coffee waiting in the morning, warm laundry folded before bed. My husband, Mark, worked for a construction supply company. He'd been there almost 15 years, started as a driver, worked his way up to a regional coordinator. He was proud of that car, the company sedan, silver gray with the logo printed on the door. He'd say, "They trust me enough to give me wheels. That means something." And I believed him. I believed everything. Saturdays were his inventory check days. That's what he called them. Said the warehouse sometimes ran short, and he had to drive out early to oversee shipments. It sounded responsible, and I never questioned it. Mark was a man who liked order. His shirts were always ironed, his truck spotless, his schedule predictable. Looking back, I realize how much I depended on that predictability. It made me feel safe, like our life was built on something real and steady. We weren't rich, but we were proud of what we had. A small brick house in Ohio, a pair of used cars, a backyard swing set that squeaked when the wind picked up. Sometimes on quiet mornings, I'd stand in the kitchen, making pancakes while he got ready for inventory, and I'd think, we did it. We built something that lasts. It's almost cruel how normal it all felt before that morning. The day everything started to crack was a Saturday in late April. The air smelled like wet, grass and spring dust. That scent of change you don't notice until later. Mark had left early just before sunrise, same as usual. He kissed my forehead, grabbed his thermos, said, "Warehouse run. I'll be back after noon." I nodded. Half asleep, told him to drive safe. A few hours later, I had to drop off a donation box at a friend's place across town. That's when I saw it, his car, parked neatly in front of that yellow house. At first, I didn't think anything of it. The logo was familiar, but there were plenty of company cars like his. I even smiled to myself, thinking, what a coincidence. But then I saw the plate. Our plate? The small dent on the rear bumper where he'd backed into the mailbox last winter. My stomach turned. I slowed down, pretending to check my phone, my eyes fixed on the front door of the house. A curtain moved. Someone was home. I waited. Maybe he'd come out. Maybe there was some innocent reason. But instead I saw her. A woman I'd never met, stepping out in a bathrobe, carrying a mug of coffee, her hair tousled like she'd just woken up. She looked comfortable, too comfortable. And that's when I felt the ground shift under me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something smaller, colder, disbelief. That quiet voice inside me whispered, "No, there must be an explanation." And then another voice, sharper, said, "You already know the truth." I sat there for what felt like an hour, engine humming, trying to make sense of what my eyes were seeing. The street was calm, ordinary, a few kids riding bikes, a lawnmower buzzing nearby. Everything looked normal, except my life wasn't anymore. I didn't go up to the door that day. I wish I could tell you I did. That I stormed up, demanded answers, tore the lie apart right there on the porch. But I didn't. I drove away. I needed to breathe, to think, to make sure I wasn't about to destroy my life based on a guess. I went home, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, all the while replaying that image of his car in front of her house. By the time he came home around 2, smiling, tired, smelling like coffee and sawdust, I'd convinced myself it didn't mean what it looked like. He said inventory was a mess today, kissed me on the cheek, asked what was for lunch. And I said, chicken salad, just like I always did. That was the beginning of the end, and I didn't even know it. It's strange how betrayal doesn't crash into your life all at once. It drips in slowly, like water from a cracked faucet. You ignore it, tell yourself it's nothing, until one day you realize the sink's overflowing. That night, as we watched TV, I noticed something I hadn't before. How often he looked at his phone. How quickly he turned it face down on the couch. I noticed how he laughed a little too hard at nothing, how he avoided my eyes when I asked about work. And for the first time in years, I felt like a stranger sitting next to him. The next morning, he left early again. And I just sat there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. It was the first time I realized how much silence can hurt. That's when I decided I needed to know the truth. Not tomorrow. Not when the time is right. Now. And that's exactly where this story really begins. Before that morning, before I saw his car at the wrong house, I would have told anyone we had a good marriage. Not perfect, but good. We were two people who had built a life the hard way, brick by paycheck. Mark and I met when we were 23, both working night shifts at a distribution warehouse. I was saving for community college, and he was saving to buy his first truck. He used to bring me coffee on my breaks, and I liked that he wasn't one of those smooth talkers. He was quiet, hardworking, the kind of man who kept his promises. He'd say things like, "If you want something solid, you build it yourself." And I believed that. I liked that we didn't need grand gestures to feel connected. We just understood each other. We got married 2 years later in a small church with plastic flowers and sheet cake. My dress came from a consignment shop, his suit from a clearance rack, but that day, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. We bought a fixer-upper a few months later, a 2-bedroom with leaky pipes and ugly carpet, but we turned it into a home. We spent weekends painting, patching, arguing over cabinet handles, and eating pizza on the floor when we ran out of energy. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Over time, our lives settled into a rhythm: work, kids, chores, bills, sleep. We didn't travel much, didn't go out much either. But we laughed often. We watched game shows and shared popcorn. He'd fall asleep on the couch, and I'd drape a blanket over him before going to bed. Little things. Ordinary things. Our 2 kids, Ethan and Claire, grew up surrounded by that steadiness. Mark coached Ethan's baseball team, helped Claire build her science projects. He was patient, kind, the kind of father people admired, and I loved that about him. I loved that even after all those years, he still called me Hun. He'd squeeze my hand when we crossed the street or when we sat in church. If someone had asked me to describe my marriage back then, I'd have said, we're a team. But even teams can fall apart when one player stops showing up. The first crack started small. He began working late, nothing unusual at first. They're restructuring schedules, he said. Short-staffed again. I believed him because it sounded reasonable, but slowly, the pattern changed. He stopped calling to check in during lunch breaks. He'd come home smelling different, not like cologne or perfume, but like the inside of someone else's house. Warm detergent, maybe, or a different kind of coffee. I remember asking him once, half joking, "You seeing someone else's laundry room?" He laughed, said, "I wish I had time for that," and went back to scrolling on his phone. At first, I let it go. That's what wives do when they trust. We let things slide because love teaches you to give the benefit of the doubt. He'd been under stress. The company had new management, and he said they were pushing him to travel more, visit clients, keep morale up. One night, he came home exhausted and said, "Honey, you know I'm doing this for us, right? I'm trying to move up so you can relax a little." And I believed him, because I wanted to believe him. There's this quiet thing that happens when you live with someone long enough. You start memorizing the small details, the way their key sounds in the lock, the rhythm of their footsteps in the hallway, the smell of their shampoo. When even one of those details changes, your heart notices before your brain does. I started noticing. The way he paused before answering questions. The way he'd go silent when I entered the room while he was on the phone. The way his phone started living face down on the table instead of screen up. But still, I made excuses. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was overthinking, until one night I found a hotel receipt in the laundry. It was folded inside the pocket of his jeans. A small, plain slip of paper that changed the way I looked at him forever. The receipt was from a hotel just 30 miles away. The date was last weekend, the same weekend he said he'd been in Cleveland for a supplier meeting. It wasn't expensive, mid-range, business kind of place, but it didn't belong in our life. Not when he'd said he'd been out of town. I remember holding that piece of paper in my hand, staring at the printed date like it might explain itself. But it didn't. When I confronted him, I didn't accuse. I asked softly, "Were you at this hotel last Saturday?" He blinked, then smiled, that same tired smile, and said, "Oh yeah, that's where the company put us up before the conference." Why? The calmness in his tone almost made me feel guilty for doubting him. I nodded, said, "Just curious," and tucked the receipt away. That was my warning sign. And I ignored it. A few weeks later, he started talking about a new colleague, Sandra. He mentioned her casually, said she'd transferred from another branch, was helping streamline logistics. At first, it didn't bother me. I even told him to invite her and her husband over sometime. He said, "Oh, she's not married." Something about the way he said it, too cleanly, made me pause. But again, I pushed it down. Because that's what we do when we've built our life around someone. We protect the illusion, even from ourselves. Now, when I look back at those months before the truth came out, I can see how fragile everything really was. The laughter felt thinner. The quiet moments felt heavier. We were two people still sharing a house, but living in different emotional worlds. He'd leave early on weekends, calling it extra warehouse shifts. He'd come home late, sometimes with excuses that didn't even make sense, like traffic in a town that never had any. He stopped sitting next to me on the couch, stopped touching me in that absent-minded familiar way couples do when they're comfortable. One night, lying in bed beside him, I remember whispering to myself, "He's already gone, isn't he?" He was there, breathing beside me, and still, it felt like I was alone. If you'd told me then that I'd soon be driving down a quiet street, staring at his car parked in front of another woman's house, I would have laughed. I would have said, "Not my husband, not Mark, but now I know. No one ever sees it coming." Not really. You only realize the storm was forming once it's already raining, and by the time I understood it, I was already standing in the flood. It started on a Thursday. Not some dramatic day, just an ordinary one. I remember because I'd just gotten home from work, and the kids were arguing about whose turn it was to take out the trash. I was halfway through making spaghetti when Mark called. "Hey, honey," he said, a little too bright. "I've got to stay late again. Numbers aren't matching up. Don't wait for me." I looked at the clock. It was 6:07 p.m. "All right," I said, trying to sound casual. "You'll eat when you get home?" He hesitated, just for a heartbeat, and then said, "Maybe. Don't worry about me." That tiny pause stayed with me all evening. It wasn't long enough to mean anything on its own, but when you've loved someone long enough, you learn to read their silences more than their words. He came home at midnight. No smell of alcohol, no lipstick on his collar, nothing obvious. Just tired eyes and a quiet apology. "I'm sorry," he said, kissing the top of my head. "You okay?" And I wanted to say, "No, I'm not okay," but I smiled instead. The next morning, I found another hotel receipt. Same place as before. Different date. I stared at it for a long time, my coffee growing cold. I didn't confront him that time. I just slipped it into a drawer in my dresser, the same drawer where I kept birthday cards and old love notes. It felt strange putting that evidence beside our past happiness, but I couldn't throw it away either. Not yet. Something inside me, maybe pride, maybe survival, told me to wait. That's how suspicion works. It doesn't explode all at once. It seeps in slowly, like water through a crack in the wall. That weekend, I decided to drop by his office unannounced. It wasn't something I normally did, but he'd left his lunch at home, and I figured it would be a sweet surprise. The receptionist looked up when I walked in. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson. I didn't know Mark was coming in today." That sentence stopped me cold. "Coming in?" I repeated. "He told me he had a full Saturday meeting." She frowned. "No, he's off-site this weekend." "Everyone is. The warehouse is closed." I managed a polite smile and left before my knees gave out. In the car, my hands shook so badly I had to sit for a while before I could drive home. He wasn't there when I got back. The kids were at my sister's house, so I just sat on the couch, staring at the muted TV. That's when my phone buzzed, a notification from our joint bank account. New charge, Holiday Inn, on 124.36. The timestamp said 12:41 p.m. That was less than 30 minutes ago. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at that message, watching the tiny blue light of my phone blink like a heartbeat. Then I did something I'd never done before. I drove without thinking, straight down the highway, past the exit for our neighborhood, past the sign that said City Center. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, my chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. And there it was. His company car, parked in the corner, near a row of maple trees. I sat there for what felt like hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath shaking. I wasn't sure what I expected, to see them walk out, to catch him in the act. Part of me wanted to run in and demand answers. But another part, the quieter, older part of me, just whispered, "Wait." So I waited. At 2:15 p.m., I saw them, a woman in a red blouse, Mark beside her holding a takeout bag. They laughed about something as they walked toward the car, and then he kissed her. Not some secretive, guilty peck. No. It was easy, familiar. He'd done it 1,000 times before. People always talk about heartbreak gets this big, dramatic collapse. You scream or throw things. But for me, it was quiet. So quiet I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. I just watched as he opened the passenger door for her, helped her in, and drove off. When I finally exhaled, I realized I was gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. That night, when he came home, he kissed me on the cheek and asked, "You okay?" "You look tired." I looked at him, at the man I thought I knew, and said, "Just didn't sleep well." He smiled, completely unaware that I'd watched him betray me just hours earlier. Over the next few days, I became someone else. I still cooked dinner, still packed lunches, still said, "Love you," when he left. But underneath all of it, something hard and sharp was forming inside me. I started checking his mileage on the car, comparing his claimed destinations to Google Maps, matching hotel charges to his supposed travel days. Every lie had a receipt. Every smile had a shadow. And the more I uncovered, the calmer I became. That calmness scared me. It wasn't forgiveness. It was focus, because deep down I already knew what came next. One night I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He was in the shower, so I glanced at it. A message flashed across the screen. "Can't wait to see you Saturday." Same place? I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I just sat there staring at that single letter, S, and realized I was no longer living in denial. I was living in strategy. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And I'd just decided that the next time he lied to me, I wouldn't confront him with tears. I'd confront him with proof, and not in private, but in the one place he valued most. His work. His reputation. His pride. That's where I'd hit him back. After that message from S appeared on his phone, I stopped guessing. Guessing had kept me trapped in the hope that maybe, somehow, I was wrong. Now I needed certainty, even if it destroyed me. So I started documenting everything. Dates, times, hotel charges, mileage, photos. I treated it like a project. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet, but because my heart needed proof that I wasn't crazy. For years I had trusted Mark with everything. The bills, the passwords, the future. He was the planner, the calm one. Now, I was realizing he'd also been the liar. The first thing I did was check his company car logs. Every month he had to submit mileage reports for fuel reimbursements. They were always so neat, so perfectly aligned. But one night, When he fell asleep on the couch, I quietly took photos of the folder he kept in his laptop bag. Later, I cross-checked the entries against our bank account history. And there it was. A pattern. Every time he had late meetings, there was a hotel charge nearby. Not in different cities, he claimed, just across town. Same place, different dates. He'd been using my salary account for gas, our credit card for dinners, and our weekends for his secret getaways. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was letting me pay for it. It's funny, in a cruel way, how you start noticing things you'd ignored before. How he always came home freshly showered from work trips. Or how his phone was suddenly face down on the counter every night. Or how he changed his cologne from cedarwood to something lighter, floral. I knew what that meant. Someone else liked it. I started following a pattern of my own. I'd wait until Saturday mornings when he said he had warehouse inspections. Then I'd drop the kids at my sister's place, grab a coffee, and drive. Always to the same part of town. Always to that same beige hotel near the freeway. The third time, I saw it again. His company car parked near the back fence. This time, I didn't sit in my own car. I got out. My hands were trembling so hard that I could barely unlock my phone camera. I walked across the lot, pretending to look for my keys, and snapped a few photos. License plate, hotel sign, time stamp. Then I sat in the driver's seat and waited, heart pounding in my ears. 2 hours later, they came out. Mark and the same woman in the red blouse. She looked younger, maybe early 30s. The kind of woman who still smiled like she didn't know what betrayal looked like yet. He was carrying a small overnight bag. He put it in the trunk, kissed her cheek, and drove off. I followed him for a few blocks before pulling over. I didn't need to see more. I'd seen enough. That night I couldn't sleep. I just lay there beside him, watching the shadows of his breathing rise and fall. I wondered if he felt even a flicker of guilt, if he ever looked at me and thought, "You don't deserve this." But when morning came, he smiled at me like nothing had changed. He poured me coffee. He talked about yard work and grocery lists. That's when I realized he wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to wake up one day and decide that our marriage was worth more than his secret. He'd built this double life too carefully, and that's what broke me the most. Not that he cheated, but that he planned it. Every detail. Every lie. Every late night. All of it crafted so smoothly that I almost believed it. I remember sitting at the kitchen table later that day, staring at the photos on my phone. His car, the hotel, the timestamps. Concrete proof, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral. Not of a person, but of the version of my life I thought was real. For days, I couldn't bring myself to confront him. I kept going through the motions. School drop-offs, grocery runs, dinner prep. The only thing different was me. I was quieter, more watchful, detached. I was observing my own life from the outside. That's when my sister noticed. She came over one afternoon and said, "You've been off lately. What's going on?" And I told her in everything. The receipts, the car, the woman. She didn't interrupt me once. When I was done, she said softly, "You're too calm." I laughed bitterly. "What else can I be? Screaming won't change it." She nodded. "No, but it'll remind you you're still alive." That night I finally cried. Not the soft kind, the kind that comes from your gut, where you realize something inside you has permanently shifted. When I was done, I felt empty. But in that emptiness, something new began forming. Not hope, but clarity. I started thinking about the kind of man Mark really was, not the one he pretended to be. The one who wore integrity like a uniform because it looked good at work. The one who smiled at company dinners, praising family values, while sneaking hotel charges under travel expenses. He had built his career on being reliable, trustworthy, loyal. The perfect team player. And I realized, if I was going to take him down, I didn't have to scream. I just had to show people who he really was. And I had the receipts, literal ones. One evening, while he was in the shower, I quietly copied all the files from his laptop onto a flash drive. Expense reports, meeting schedules, emails. I wasn't sure yet how I'd use them, but I knew this much. If he could plan lies that perfectly, I could plan truth just as carefully. Because the opposite of betrayal isn't forgiveness. It's exposure. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye like always. "Big meeting today," he said, adjusting his tie. "I might be late," I smiled. "Take your time," he left the house humming. And I sat there at the kitchen counter, sipping my coffee, staring at the flash drive on the table. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt focused, sharp. The sadness was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was fueling me. I knew exactly where he'd be next week. The quarterly board meeting. The one where all his superiors would attend. The one where he'd stand in front of everyone, talking about leadership and transparency. And that, I decided, was where his double life would end. The morning after I decided to expose him, everything felt eerily still. The same house, the same coffee mug, the same routine, yet it all looked different now, like I'd been living in a set built for someone else's life. I wasn't the wife waiting for answers anymore. I was the woman building the ending. For the first time in months, I didn't cry when he left for work. I just sat there, staring at the sunlight moving across our kitchen table, thinking about how I'd spent years softening myself to keep peace. That version of me, the one who apologized first, who believed every excuse, who smiled to keep things normal, she was gone. And in her place, there was someone patient, deliberate, and strangely calm. Because when you finally stop begging for honesty, you start crafting truth on your own terms. The plan didn't come all at once. It started as a whisper, a thought that scared me at first. What if I didn't confront him privately? What if everyone saw what I saw? I pushed the thought away at first. It felt cruel. But the more I remembered every lie, every late night, every time he made me feel paranoid for simply noticing, the less cruel it felt. It started feeling fair. He'd built this lie in public, so he could fall in public too. That week, I started preparing quietly. I organized all the evidence, the hotel receipts, the mileage reports, the photos of his car, and the message from S. I arranged them neatly in a folder titled Reimbursement, Q2, Expenses, and placed it in a neutral brown envelope. Then I made a copy of the same folder and emailed it to my personal account, just in case. Next, I checked his company calendar. He'd left his work email open one night, and I saw it. The board meeting scheduled for Friday morning, 10 a.m. at the downtown office. That was my day. That was when I'd hand the truth back to him, in front of the people he'd worked so hard to impress. In the days leading up to Friday, I played my role perfectly. I laughed at dinner. I asked about his projects. I even ironed his shirts, the same ones he probably wore to meet her. Each moment felt like a rehearsal, the last act before the curtain dropped. Sometimes, late at night, doubt would sneak in. I'd wonder if I was taking it too far, if public humiliation was too much. But then I'd remember the way he looked at me when I questioned him about his trips, that practiced mix of annoyance and pity, like I was some insecure woman inventing stories. That's when I'd whisper to myself, "No, this isn't revenge. This is justice in daylight." On Thursday night, I barely slept. He was packing his laptop bag, humming like a man who thought he had the world neatly under control. I watched him from the bed, and for a moment, I almost pitied him. He really believed he was untouchable. When he kissed my forehead and said, "Wish me luck tomorrow," I smiled and said, "You'll need it." He thought I meant for his presentation. I didn't. Friday morning, I dressed carefully. Plain blouse, jeans, clean face. No makeup, no perfume. Just honesty. I took the brown envelope from my drawer and slipped it into my tote bag. My hands didn't shake this time. As I drove downtown, I felt strangely light. Almost peaceful. Like the storm had already passed, and I was simply walking through the wreckage. When I arrived, the security guard recognized me. I'd attended company family events before. I smiled politely, told him I was dropping off paperwork for Mark. He waved me through without a second glance. Upstairs, the boardroom was filled with executives. I could see them through the glass. Mark standing at the front, his slides glowing behind him, voice steady, smile confident, the same smile that had lied to me for years. I waited until he clicked to the final slide. Company integrity and vision. Then I opened the door. The room turned. He froze mid-sentence. Sorry to interrupt, I said, voice calm but clear. I just needed to return some company materials that belong here. I walked up, placed the envelope on the conference table, right beside his notes. His eyes met mine, a flash of panic beneath the professional mask. He reached for the envelope, but his boss, Mr. Grady, was faster. He opened it, curious. Inside were the hotel receipts, fuel records, and photos. I didn't have to say a word. The silence was heavier than shouting. The kind that fills a room when everyone realizes something private has just become public. Mark stammered. This is personal, Mr. Grady frowned. On company time, company expenses, and a company car? I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just looked at Mark and said softly, You always said honesty mattered most. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't look back. But as the elevator doors closed, I heard his voice rising, desperate, defensive. For the first time, he wasn't in control of the story, and that was enough. When I got home, I made myself coffee and sat on the porch. My phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, messages, even one from his assistant. Mark's been asked to step down temporarily. Are you okay? Was I okay? Not exactly. But I was free. The truth had finally left my body. That night, he came home looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in a day. He stood in the doorway, eyes hollow. You ruined me, he said quietly. I met his gaze. No, Mark. You did that yourself. I just turned on the lights. He didn't argue. He just walked upstairs, packed a small bag, and left. The sound of that door closing was the first peace I'd felt in months. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was quiet, sunlight spilling through the blinds. I made breakfast for myself, 1 cup of coffee, 1 plate, 1 life. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything. Not an apology. Not closure. Just space to breathe again. I didn't know what came next. Maybe divorce papers, maybe rebuilding. But whatever it would be on my terms. Because sometimes the turning point isn't the day you catch the lie. It's the day you stop needing the liar. For the next few days after the boardroom scene, silence became my companion. No calls from him, no footsteps in the hallway, no hollow promises echoing through our house. Just quiet, and I loved every second of it. But silence has a way of testing you. It makes you wonder what comes next. Would he come back begging? Would he fight to reclaim what he lost? His job, his image, me? He did, and it happened sooner than I expected. It was Thursday night. I'd just finished folding laundry when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Headlights flashed through the window and I froze. The sound of the door opening, familiar footsteps. Then his voice, soft but trembling. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away. I placed the folded towel on the couch and finally turned. He looked smaller, like the weight of his lies had finally crushed his pride. I shouldn't have come here, he said quickly, running a hand through his hair. But I didn't know where else to go. I crossed my arms. You still have her house, don't you? He flinched. She's gone. She left after everything came out. I lost everything, May. Hearing my name in his voice didn't hurt anymore. It just sounded empty. He went on, his words spilling like a confession. How the other woman had quit her job after the scandal. How his company froze his accounts. How his resignation turned into a permanent dismissal. He was humiliated, stripped of everything he'd used to define himself. Then came the sentence that almost made me laugh. I miss you. I want to come home. Home. That word. It used to mean warmth, family, safety. Now it sounded like a place I used to rent but no longer lived in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Home? I said quietly. You turned it into a place I couldn't recognize. He tried to defend himself. The usual excuses. The midlife stress, the pressure at work, the woman who listened. But it all dissolved in the air between us. I just shook my head. Do you even hear yourself? You didn't trip and fall into betrayal, Mark. You walked into it, paid for it, and parked your company car out front. He took a step closer, desperate now. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll get another job. We'll go to therapy. I held up my hand. No, we won't. He froze. You don't get to rebuild something you burned just because you don't like the ashes. The power in those words surprised even me. Because I realized then, this was never about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Of dignity. Of self-worth. Of peace. He looked around the house, eyes scanning the walls, the furniture, the family photos. He was searching for the life he used to own. But it wasn't here anymore. It was standing in front of him, no longer his to control. Please, he said softly. Just tell me what you want. For a moment, I stayed silent. Then I spoke slowly, clearly. I want what you took from me. Time, trust, and choice. I can't get that back. So I'll take the one thing I still can, my freedom. I handed him a folder from the side table, divorce papers. Already signed. Filed that morning, he stared at it stunned. May, you already— Yes, I interrupted. You taught me to prepare for disappointment. So I did. He sat down on the couch, head in his hands. I expected anger, denial, but what came out was softer. Defeat. I don't know how to start over, he whispered. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, That's not my problem to solve anymore. When he left that night, I stood by the window and watched him walk to his car. Not his company car. Not the shiny emblem of power and status he used to boast about. Just a borrowed sedan, plain and unremarkable. It suited him now. As he drove away, something inside me unclenched, that invisible knot I'd carried for years. The fear of being alone, the guilt of speaking up, the habit of forgiving too quickly. Gone. Because sometimes the climax of your story isn't a fight, a slap, or a scream. Sometimes it's just one clean decision, and the quiet that follows. 2 days later, I met with my lawyer to finalize the terms. The house was mine. I'd bought out his share using the money he left in our joint savings. Irony can be poetic when justice is involved. He sent a short email afterward. I'll sign. I don't want to fight you anymore. Good. Neither did I. Weeks passed. I started sleeping through the night again. I went back to my job at the community center where people treated me like a person, not an accessory to someone else's reputation. And then one morning, I got a message from an old friend. She'd seen Mark at a gas station across town. He was pumping gas into a beat-up car, wearing a discount store jacket, looking normal. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. Just relief, because seeing him reduced to the man he really was, not the version he performed, that was closure enough. That weekend, I drove to the edge of town. There's this quiet overlook I used to visit years ago, before marriage, before everything. I parked my car, stepped out, and let the wind hit my face. I thought about how I used to dream of forever with him, and how in the forever turned out to be too long for a man who couldn't tell the truth for one evening. I closed my eyes, whispered to myself, You did it. You ended it right. And for the first time since this story began, I smiled. Not the smile of a woman pretending to be okay, but of one who finally is. The weeks after the divorce were quiet. Not lonely quiet, but the kind of stillness that feels like healing. There was no longer the sound of keys jangling in the door at midnight. No half-hearted apologies. No second-guessing my own worth. Just peace. And peace, I learned, is the loudest sound when you've lived too long in chaos. The first few mornings felt strange. I'd wake up early, half expecting to hear the shower running or smell coffee brewing. And then I'd remember. That chapter was closed. But instead of sadness, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I started reclaiming little pieces of myself. One morning routine at a time. I'd open the blinds and let sunlight pour in, something I never used to do because he said it made the room too bright. Now, I wanted light. I wanted brightness everywhere. My friends began visiting more often. At first, I was embarrassed to let them in, like my broken marriage was a stain that might spread if they got too close. But they came anyway, bearing casseroles, laughter, and stories about their own heartbreaks that somehow made mine feel less lonely. One afternoon, my friend Denise sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, May, you look lighter. Like you can finally breathe. And for the first time, I admitted it out loud. I can. That simple sentence carried years of silence with it. Of course, healing isn't linear. There were nights when memories came back, the smell of his cologne, the echo of his laughter with someone else, the sting of how small I made myself to keep peace. Those moments still hurt, but I didn't push them away. I let them pass through, like waves that no longer threatened to drown me. I was learning to float, even in memories that once pulled me under. A month after the divorce was finalized, I took a trip, not to escape, but to rediscover. I drove alone to the coast, a place we'd always talked about visiting but never did because he said it was too far. Too expensive, too impractical. But impracticality felt like freedom now. The drive was long, but it felt like medicine. I rolled the windows down, played old Motown songs, and sang along badly. No one to judge me, no one to silence me. When I reached the beach, I parked the car and just stood there for a long time, watching the water stretch out endlessly. Something about the horizon made me realize endings and beginnings share the same line. It's just where you choose to stand that makes the difference. That night, I booked a small ocean view room and wrote in a journal I'd started keeping. The first page read, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." It became my mantra. I filled that journal with small victories, cooking a new recipe, fixing the broken faucet myself, paying off a bill early, laughing without guilt. Every page was proof that life could still bloom after betrayal. Back home, I began volunteering more at the community center. Helping other women, some going through separation, some just struggling to find their footing, gave my pain purpose. One woman, a mother of 3, told me through tears, "I don't think I can start over." I looked her in the eye and said softly, "You don't have to start over. Just start different." That became another truth I lived by. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the quiet street. I'd see couples walking their dogs, porch lights flickering, laughter from next door. Normalcy. And I realized I didn't envy it anymore. Because peace is not found in perfection. It's found in the absence of pretending. I used to think I needed closure from him, some apology or explanation that would make sense of the mess. But closure didn't come in a conversation. It came the moment I stopped needing answers to move on. Months passed, and life found a rhythm again. I redecorated the house, painted the walls a soft sage green, replaced his leather recliner with a cozy reading chair, and hung new photos of me and the kids, smiling, laughing, whole. My son said one afternoon, "Mom, the house feels happier now." And I smiled because he was right. The energy had shifted. The air no longer carried secrets. One morning, while grocery shopping, I bumped into someone from Mark's old company. They looked hesitant, unsure of what to say. But I just smiled politely and moved on. That's when I realized I wasn't carrying his story anymore. I was writing mine. That realization felt like shedding an old coat, heavy, familiar, and unnecessary. Spring came, and with it, new growth. I planted flowers in the front yard, bright marigolds, lavender, and roses. The garden became symbolic of everything I'd learned. Growth takes time, patience, and the courage to pull weeds without apology. Neighbors started stopping by just to chat, complimenting the garden. Each conversation was small but meaningful. Connection without the shadow of lies, it felt like living again. I won't lie and say everything became perfect. There are still moments when loneliness creeps in. A song, a scent, a memory that stings. But now, instead of fearing those moments, I honor them, because they remind me how far I've come. Healing didn't erase the pain. It gave it context. It taught me that survival isn't strength. Transformation is. One Sunday evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat in that same chair on the porch and whispered a small prayer. Not for him, not even for forgiveness, but for gratitude. That I was strong enough to walk away. Gratitude that my children could grow up seeing what self-respect looks like. Gratitude that sometimes losing someone can mean finding yourself. And in that stillness, I felt it. Peace. Pure and steady. The kind that doesn't need permission to stay. They say time heals everything, but I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal. Truth does. Owning your story, even the parts that broke you, is what sets you free. And that's what I did. I stopped pretending, stopped justifying, and started living honestly, even if honesty meant standing alone for a while. Looking back now, I can see how blind I was to the little signs, not because I was foolish, but because I was hopeful. I wanted to believe in love so badly that I ignored the parts that hurt. I excused the silences, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. I told myself it was just stress, work, exhaustion, but the truth was simpler. I was carrying a marriage on my own. And no matter how strong you are, you can't hold something together if the other person has already let go. If you're listening to this, maybe you're in that place now, confused, heartbroken, trying to make sense of the pieces. Maybe you're still asking, how did this happen to me? I wish I could tell you there's an easy answer. There isn't, but there is a way forward. It starts the moment you stop blaming yourself for someone else's betrayal. Because cheating doesn't happen because of what you lack. It happens because of what they choose. And once you accept that, you stop chasing explanations that will never come. In the months after everything ended, people asked me, "Do you regret finding out?" And my answer was always the same. No. I regret trusting the wrong person. But I don't regret finding the truth. Because truth, no matter how painful, gives you something lies never can. Clarity. And clarity is the beginning of peace. If I could go back and talk to the woman I was before that Saturday morning, before I saw his company car parked in front of another woman's house, I'd tell her this. You will survive this. You will cry harder than you ever thought possible. But one day, you'll wake up and the air will taste like freedom. You'll stop replaying the betrayal and start writing your own ending. Because every ending is just a beginning in disguise. I used to think strength meant holding everything together. Now I know strength is the moment you finally let go. Not in anger, but in peace. It's when you say, "This is not love, and I deserve better." That's the kind of courage that rebuilds lives. So if you're listening to me right now, whether you're driving, cooking, folding laundry, or sitting in silence trying to find your next step, I want you to hear this from someone who's been there. You will not stay broken. The pain that feels endless today will one day become your story of becoming. And when you tell it, you'll help someone else stand up too. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave him. The truth is, yes, in my own way. Not because he asked for it, and not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace more than I deserved revenge. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't about saying, "It's okay." It's about saying, "It happened, and I'm done letting it define me." That kind of forgiveness isn't weakness, it's release. These days, I still drive by that old office sometimes. The parking lot is different, the faces have changed. But I remember that morning vividly. The cold air, the stillness before everything unraveled. And I smile, not in bitterness, but in gratitude, because that was the day I stopped being afraid of the truth. And once you stop being afraid of the truth, there's nothing left that can control you. Now, my life is quieter, simpler, but richer. I find joy in small things: morning walks, laughter with my kids, the smell of fresh bread, the way sunlight hits the kitchen counter just right. Those are the moments that remind me, peace doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in the quiet acceptance that you made it through. To anyone listening who feels stuck, lost, or betrayed, please remember, you don't have to rebuild all at once. Start with one honest decision, then another. That's how you come back to yourself, one truth at a time. When I first told this story, I was scared of judgment, of pity, of reliving the pain. But now I tell it with pride, because I know there's someone out there who needs to hear it. Maybe that someone is you, so, from my heart to yours, if your world has fallen apart, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Feel the pieces. And then, when you're ready, build something new, something true. And before I go, let me say what I always say. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels, because every story, even the painful ones, deserves to travel somewhere. To remind someone, somewhere, that healing is real, that truth is worth it, and that starting over isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be.